Before Red Bluff became a town, it was a scar. In the summer of 1878, the Colorado Territory still breathed dust and old violence. The wind carried more than sand through the canyons. It carried memories, grudges, and truths no one dared speak aloud. At the edge of the Dane estate, where white-painted walls tried too hard to look innocent, stood a man who never truly belonged anywhere. Nico Blackstone had been born Apache and raised by loss. Survival had shaped him into something quiet and dangerous, a man who moved through the world like a shadow that refused to disappear. For nearly a decade, he had worked for Judge Dane, tracking men, settling problems that never reached court, ending conflicts before they became public scandals. Loyalty, however, had never earned him respect. To the town, he was tolerated. To the law, he was useful. To the judge, he was expendable. That evening, lantern lights spilled across the porch of the estate, music drifting into the dark like a lie dressed in silk. Inside, laughter rang out, polite, rehearsed, hollow. It was a celebration, an engagement dinner. Nico remained outside, arms crossed, watching the perimeter as he always did. The woman being celebrated was Leona Dane. She stood near a tall window, framed by velvet curtains, her posture perfect, her smile practiced. The man beside her, soon to be her husband, spoke endlessly about elections, influence, and the future. She nodded when expected, silent when allowed. From the shadows, Nico noticed what others didn't. Her eyes were alert, not hopeful, trapped. 9 years earlier, he had seen her barefoot in the orchard, dirt on her hands, sunlight in her hair. She hadn't looked at him with fear or superiority, just curiosity. That single moment had stayed with him longer than it should have. Their eyes met briefly through the glass. Nothing passed between them that could be named, but something was understood. Nico turned away before it became dangerous. The night grew quiet faster than expected. Back in the bunkhouse, Nico washed the day from his skin with cold water and silence. The party sounds faded. Horses shifted. Doors closed. Then came something wrong. A dull impact. A hurried voice. A scrape across dirt. Nico was on his feet instantly. Moonlight revealed chaos where there should have been order. Disturbed soil near a servant's entrance. Boot prints too deep, too rushed. And something dragged. His pulse slowed, sharpened. He followed the trail past the gardens, through the orchard, down toward the lower fields where the land broke into ravines and bad ground. Near the edge, he found it. A torn piece of pale fabric caught on a thorn. Leona's. The tracks turned east. Multiple horses. One struggling. The Badlands waited in that direction. Places without law, without witnesses. Nico didn't ask permission. He saddled his horse with bare efficiency and rode hard past the estate, passing the judge's study where warm light still glowed. Voices drifted through the open window. "She's gone," someone said. A pause. "Let them take her," Judge Dane replied, cold and final. "She was never mine. She was a transaction." Something inside Nico went silent. By dawn, he was deep in the canyons, reading signs most men never saw. Hoof prints told stories. Fear, haste, certainty. The kidnappers weren't worried. They believed no one would come. They were wrong. Near an abandoned mining route, Nico slowed. The terrain tightened, cliffs rising, brush thickening. A perfect place to disappear, or to die. He left his horse hidden and moved on foot. Voices echoed faintly from stone ahead. Laughter, cruelty. A woman forced into silence. Nico didn't hesitate. The first man fell without a sound. The second barely understood what was happening before it ended. When the dust settled, Nico turned toward the darkness of the shaft. Leona lay bound against the cold earth, bruised, trembling, but alive. Her eyes found him instantly. "Nico," she whispered. He cut the ropes carefully, steady hands hiding the storm inside him. When he saw the blood, his breath caught, but her quiet words stopped him. "Not that," she said softly. "Just bad timing." Relief washed through him, sharp and painful. Outside, the sun climbed higher over Red Bluff. And somewhere behind them, a powerful man believed his secret had been buried. Relief passed through Nico like wind racing across open flame. "Oh," he murmured. No embarrassment, no retreat, only calm acceptance. He eased Leona upright and wrapped her in his coat, thick with dust and smoke in him. Her hands shook as she clutched the fabric. "I thought you wouldn't come," she whispered. I came, he replied simply. That was all. When her legs failed her, Nico caught her without effort, lifting her as though she weighed nothing. She pressed her face into his shoulder, breath uneven, fingers gripping his shirt as he carried her out of the mine and into the open. The light was blinding after the darkness. The sky felt too wide, too real. They made camp miles away in a narrow arroyo tucked between broken stone ridges. Nico coaxed a fire from dead roots, boiled water, and pressed a tin cup into her hands. She drank slowly, lips cracked, skin pale beneath the bruises. You knew where they'd take me, she said quietly. I knew the kind of men they were, Nico answered. This is where I'd hide if I didn't want to be found. Silence settled between them, not empty, not strained, just heavy. Finally, Leona spoke. Why did my father send them? Nico didn't answer right away. He cleaned his blade with steady, deliberate strokes. Because you're no longer part of his design, he said at last. Because you know things that threaten him. Her breath caught. He always hated me, she whispered. I just never understood how deeply. Nico lifted his gaze. He's not your father. She froze. I heard him say it, Nico continued. To the mayor's envoy. He said you weren't his blood. Said you weren't worth reclaiming. Understanding spread across her face like frost. That's why he never came, she said. Why he looked at me like I reminded him of something rotten. Nico said nothing. He knew that look. She tightened the coat around herself. I kept thinking if I was good enough, he'd see me. You matter, Nico said firmly. Just not to him. Her eyes burned, but no tears fell. That part of her was already gone. He'll hunt us, she said. I know it. I won't let him take you back, Nico replied. The words weren't comfort. They were a promise. Morning came slow and cold. Ashes marked where the fire had been. Leona woke stiff and aching, but alive. Nico stood watch at the edge of the arroyo, rifle resting near his hand. You sleep at all? She asked. I rested, he said. Didn't dream. Neither did I, she admitted. Not sure what that means. It means you're still holding on. By mid-morning, they were riding. Leona sat behind Nico on Ghost, arms wrapped tight as the trail narrowed along a ridge. Below them, Red Bluff appeared small and distant, a cluster of buildings beneath a white church spire. That's where we're headed, Nico said. Into town, she asked, wary. To the edge, he replied. There's someone there I trust. Mostly. The cabin sat above Red Bluff, half hidden by oak and neglect. Smoke curled from the chimney. Inside, the air smelled of paper and old battles. Glenn emerged from the back room, gray, sharp-eyed, one glass eye catching the light. Well, he muttered. Didn't expect you back. And certainly not with her. She needs rest, Nico said. Glenn studied Leona. You know what trouble follows her. Trouble already found me, Leona replied. That night, as Leona slept, Nico told her Glenn's story. How he'd once worn a badge. How he'd refused another commission after watching justice burn villages instead of protecting them. He doesn't trust easily, Nico said. But he recognizes truth. The next morning, Glenn handed Nico a folded document. Quiet clerk owed me, he said. Deeds. Updated. Leona scanned the list, then stiffened. That's my mother's land. Transferred illegally, Nico said. Forged. He stole it, she whispered. And if he lied about that? He lied about everything. Glenn finished. There's proof, Leona said suddenly. A safe in his study. Hidden. Nico nodded. Then we go tonight. Darkness wrapped the estate when they returned. Inside the study, the safe yielded its secrets, deeds, ledgers, a black book heavy with names and payments. And a letter. My mother's, Leona breathed. He kept it. From the doorway came a click of a hammer being drawn back. Drop it. Sheriff Rook Lyle stood framed in lantern light, deputies beside him. You're not a Dane anymore, Rook sneered. Leona's fingers slid toward the pistol Nico had given her. The moment stretched, steel, breath, decision. She wasn't afraid anymore. And Nico knew this wasn't an ending. It was ignition. They disappeared into the timber as dawn chased the night away. Wind cut across their faces, carrying the thunder of hooves over dry roots and shattered earth. Behind them, the Dane manor burned. Whether by accident, desperation, or something closer to justice, neither of them said aloud. They rode until the sky softened with color. Near the edge of an abandoned ranch, tucked between low ridges, they found shelter. A half-collapsed barn slumping inward like a tired old animal. Leona slid from the saddle, legs shaking, her face drained of color. "You're bleeding," she said. Nico glanced down. Blood had soaked through his coat, dark and sticky along his side. "It's nothing," he muttered. "Sit," she ordered. For once, he obeyed. She tore strips from the lining of her dress, cleaned the wound with whiskey scavenged from an old flask, her hands trembling but precise. He watched her work without comment. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Yes," he said, then added, "That's good." She gave a weak smile. When the bleeding slowed, she tied the bandage tight and leaned back, exhausted. "We almost died. But we didn't." She held up the black ledger. "This changes everything. It proves everything," Nico said. "Land theft, bribes, murder paid for through charities and political fronts. These men have owned Red Bluff for years," she whispered. "Not anymore." She looked at him. "What now?" "We take this beyond them," he replied. "There's a circuit judge in Santa Fe. Clean man. If anyone will listen, it's him. That's a week's ride. I'll manage." Her fingers brushed his hand. "You saved me. I've been saving you longer than you know." That night, sleep wouldn't come. The barn was quiet except for Nico's slow breathing. Leona turned toward him. "Why me?" she asked softly. "Why not walk away?" He was silent for a long moment. "The first time I saw you," he said, "you were reading in the orchard. You looked up at me like I was human. No one ever had." She swallowed. "You think that's love?" "I don't know," he said, "but it kept me from becoming like them." She leaned closer, kissed his forehead, and rested her hand over his wounded side. Outside, the wind moaned through broken beams. Wolves prowled somewhere distant. But for that night, they had peace. The trail to Santa Fe was brutal. Heat crushed the land by day, cold gnawed by night. Leona rode behind Nico, arms locked around his waist, her strength spent, but her resolve unbroken. He bled again by the second evening. They took shelter in a ruined herder's cabin among pinyon pines. Nico collapsed inside, fever burning through him. "You're burning up," she murmured. "I've had worse." "That's not an answer." She cleaned the wound again, crushed sage into a bitter paste, pressed it to the skin. His jaw tightened, but he didn't cry out. "I don't want you to die before we get there," she said. He looked at her gently. "You didn't used to care." "That's not fair." "I know." They sat quietly as the fire crackled. "They'll catch up," she said. "Yes," Nico replied. "Your father is terrified of the truth. And Sheriff Rook doesn't know when to stop." She hugged the ledger to her chest. "I thought marriage would mean safety. You deserve more than safety bought with silence." She stared into the flames. "Do people ever change?" "No," he said after a long pause. "But they can choose who they become next." They crossed into New Mexico by mid-morning on the third day. The land widened, folding into red hills and deep arroyos. Old missions and pueblos dotted the horizon like memories that refused to fade. Then came the riders. For men, masks, rifles raised. Nico forced Ghost into the rocks, dragged Leona down behind cover as bullets split the air. Dust sprayed inches from them. "They're not law," Nico muttered. "They're paid." Leona reached for her pistol. "You know how to shoot?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I know how to aim." He handed her the spare rifle. "Wait for my signal." Nico moved like smoke through stone. One man fell before he understood why. Another dropped moments later. When the remaining two advanced, Leona rose and fired. The rifle cracked. One man went down screaming. The other tried to run. Nico ended that. When it was over, Leona stared at her hands. "They're not shaking," she said. "Then you're learning." That night, they camped among towering stone spires. The stars cut sharp against the sky. Leona flipped through the ledger again, then froze. "There's a name here," she said. Nico looked up. "Judge Hurst," she whispered. "My father's mentor." Nico's expression darkened. "Then Red Bluff was never the whole story," he said. And somewhere far behind them, power was already turning to hunt what refused to stay buried. "He always claimed Judge Hurst couldn't be bought," Leona said quietly. "Then he may be the one we need." Nico wiped his blade clean and slid it back into its sheath. "Then that's where we ride." She closed the black ledger, holding it tight against her chest. "I don't want this handed over in silence. I want to speak. I want them to hear it from me." "You're certain?" "I'm done being traded, spoken over, or erased." He studied her, truly studied her, and nodded. "You're not the same woman I carried out of that cave." She touched his arm. "And you're not the man hiding in the margins anymore." They didn't kiss. Not yet. What passed between them was steadier than desire. Something forged from loyalty, shared fear, and the kind of pain that binds instead of breaks. Judge Hurst's homestead sat beyond Santa Fe, humble and unguarded. Adobe walls, cottonwoods whispering in the dusk. No soldiers. No banners of power. The old judge sat alone on the porch, journal in hand. Judge Hurst, Leona called. His eyes narrowed. "You're Dane's girl." "Not anymore." She placed the ledger in his hands. He read without speaking. Pages turned slowly. His expression hardened, not with anger, but resolve. The next morning, the sky over Santa Fe glowed pale gold. Cicadas were silent. So were the people. Inside, Hurst spoke plainly. "This is treason dressed as governance. I'll bring it to court, but it won't be clean. I'll testify," Leona said. "Every name. Every crime." He searched her face. "You know what that costs." "I do." Nico entered then. "They're coming. Rook and 4 riders." "We hold them," Hurst said. "Then we ride." Twilight bled into gunfire. Shots cracked against adobe. Dust and smoke choked the air. Nico returned fire from the stable roof. A ranch hand dropped one rider before he reached the gate. Rook charged from the side. Nico met him head-on. Steel flashed. Blood spilled. Pain tore open old wounds, but Nico didn't fall. When Rook lunged again, Leona stood behind him, pistol raised. "Don't," she warned. He did anyway. The shot ended it. When silence returned, Leona's hands shook. Nico caught her before she collapsed. "I didn't want to," she whispered. "You chose," he said gently. "That's the difference." 3 days later, the courtroom was silent. Leona's voice did not tremble as she named crimes, men, and finally her father. Warrants followed. Assets froze. Power collapsed inward on itself. She didn't stay for sentencing. Outside, she wrapped her arms around Nico and held him. "What now?" "We leave." They rode that night. No goodbyes, no ceremony. They rode until the land softened. Until pine gave way to scrub and stars hung lower, closer. Near a forgotten valley, they built a life from dust and patience. A cabin, a creek that still ran, cottonwoods that shimmered silver in moonlight. They worked. They healed. They stayed. Travelers came and went. Some broken, some bleeding, all fed. One morning, a baby waited on the step. No note, no name. Leona lifted her without question. They called her Clara. Years passed. Scars faded. Not erased, but closed. One night, beneath a sky full of stars, Leona said softly, "Do you think this is enough?" Nico took her hand. "It's not hiding. It's choosing." She smiled. They kissed, not because the story demanded it, but because the silence between them had finally learned how to hold joy. And in a place where law once failed and truth once burned, 2 people built something quieter. Not justice made of courts or guns, but justice made of staying. Thank you for listening to the end of this story. If it touched your heart, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps keep stories like this alive.